political, and you could say ordinary human moral aspects of the morality of others and the histories. People often read the Gita alone, but in fact, this dialogue takes place within a very elaborate history, political and military history. And if you know the history, then you won't wonder why Krishna is telling Arjuna to fight. So basically, Arjuna, even from a human point of view, is fighting for justice, for constitutional government, against tyranny and so on. So, but because Arjuna had something like a nervous breakdown, in the sense that he didn't want to fight, and so Krishna is urging him to act, and then Krishna is saying that there's a way to act in the world that you're not really acting at all. And so, give a simple example. Let's say, for example, someone's a police officer, and in legitimate defense of a citizen, let's say there's some crazy person attacks a school, so the police have to come and stop this person from harming children, so the police shoot the killer. That's not a crime. However, if you just go and shoot someone on your own, that is a crime. So, even in our culture, there's a sense that swallow the wrong way. Nothing dramatic. We have even in any civilization, there's a sense that when you're acting within legitimate authority, you're not acting necessarily on your own behalf. So, and then of course Krishna's taking this principle and applying it to the practice of yoga. And the word yoga does not here simply mean physical exercises or calisthenics or stretching, which was actually, that was not really the yoga, it's called yoga now. That was just the preparation so that when you sat and meditated for long periods of time, you didn't get cramps. That's why they do that. So the actual yoga, of course, is spiritual meditation. And then, so Krishna's explaining there's a way to live your whole life so that everything you do in life, you're not actually doing anything. And therefore, there's no karma. In the sense that there's no reaction to what you're doing. There's a way to do everything so that there's no reaction. And if you live that way, then at the end of this life, you don't have to take birth again and die again because you have no karma to live out in another life because you didn't do anything in this life, which technically counts as karma. So that's actually what Krishna explains. So here's one way he talks about it in the context of living in this world. And he uses the Sanskrit word yukta, which is very important in the Gita. It's used throughout the Gita. Yukta is a word formed from the same root as the word yoga. The word yoga in Sanskrit means linking, connecting. And so the word yukta is a past participle. The same root, which means linked, connected. So to be yukta, in that sense, is to be in a state of yoga. And to be in a state of yoga means that whatever you are doing or not doing, you are doing or not doing so within a relationship to the universe, to God, and to yourself, so that you're not producing any karma. So it leads to liberation. Anyway, so Krishna says in this, actually these are two verses together, Naiva kinchit karomi iti yukto manyeta tattvaved. That one who knows truth is thinking that I do not do anything at all. Actually, one should think that one who knows truth should think that I do not do anything at all. Pashan. And then we have a list of present participles. In other words, Pashan, Shunvan, Sprishan, Jigran, Ashnan, Gachan, Sapan, Shasan, Pralapan, Visarjan, Grannan, Unmishan, Nimishana, Pi, Indriyan, Indriyarteshu, Vartanta iti Tariyan. Because seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, eating, going, sleeping, breathing, chatting, giving something up or taking something, opening the eyes, even opening or closing the eyes. One should sustain the thought that Indriyani Indriyarteshu, Vartanta, that the senses are functioning in sense objects. In other words, of course, Krishna explained earlier in the Gita that we are not the body. The body is just a covering of the real person. Otherwise, thinking is not a real popular activity at the present time in the world. It's certainly not the national pastime. And so, take democracy, for example. As a simple example, I've made this point so many times. We hold it to be, along with Thomas Jefferson, actually, Declaration of Independence, we hold it to be a self-evident truth. It's like obvious. A self-evident truth that everyone's equal in terms of their value as a living being, in terms of justice before the law, so on and so forth. That everyone is equal. And of course, as I pointed out many times, that is empirically, that's absurd. Because any test you give humanity, it turns out that we're not equal. So what's interesting is that we have based our entire political system, not only ours, but we require everyone else in the world to also follow us. So the only respectable, the only civilized, in our view, political system at the present time is something which has absolutely no scientific basis. In fact, something which all science refutes. Namely our equality. So, if we're all created equal, why don't they have open admissions at UNC?
I know that too well.
So, because interestingly, our entire system, political and social system, our system of justice, it's all based on the assumption that the person is not the body. And no one thinks about this because no one thinks. But if everyone's equal, it must be the case that we are not our bodies. We must somehow be something else, and that something else is equal to everybody else is something else. And that's basically what Jefferson said, we're created equal, endowed by the Creator. So it's a spiritual fact, it's not an empirical fact. So, also, for example, another simple example, in our culture, let's say someone suffers some injury or disease and they lose a limb. Then moral people, right-thinking people are supposed to understand that that person may be physically diminished, but he or she is not less of a person. It's not like you have less rights because you lost a limb. Whoops! You have to knock those rights down by 25%, you just lost a limb. So the idea is that even if you lose some faculty or limb or whatever, before the law and in terms of your worth as a person, you're still complete. You're still a complete person. Again, that could not be the case if we were the body. And the example Krishna gives in the Gita, that we all are reincarnating approximately every 7 years. Carne, we know Latin, flesh. I guess, soul, whether it be Atma, soul, Atma Karna, soul in the body. So the body we have now is not the same body we had, let's say, 10 years ago. It's not that your child body just stretched into your present body. When we say, like someone grew, oh my God, I can't believe how you've grown. So, what does that mean, grown? It doesn't mean your little body's stretched. It's actually a different body. I mean, the skin takes about 2 weeks to replace. So if you shake hands with someone, and then shake hands again 2 weeks later, you're actually touching a different hand. So, if we just think about it, we're obviously not the body. We're obviously not the body. It's like any fool could see if they would think about it. So, that being the case, and this is the point that Krishna's making, that when the body is, or when you think that you are seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, eating, going, sleeping, breathing, etc., someone who knows truth should think, I'm not doing anything at all. It's just the body's acting. That my body is interacting with material nature, but I'm just a witness of that. Also, the word that Krishna uses here for truth is significant. Krishna says, a knower of truth. Tattva vit. Vit, knower, we still have in English. Wit, intelligent, to know. Which is the word beta. And then tattva. Essentially, English is obviously an Indo-European language. The word tattva is the word Krishna used for truth. It's a special word for truth. It doesn't just mean like, tell the truth, don't lie. The word tattva, anyway, I won't go into all the linguistic curiosities, but in the word tattva, it literally means a fundamental real thing. Tat in Sanskrit is English that. You add an H, it's English. Tat means that. So like Om Tat Sat. So anyway, so tat, or that, in English is a demonstrative pronoun. It means it's a word that points something out, that. So therefore, in ancient philosophers, who are actually very bright, they use the word tat to indicate a real thing. In other words, something you can actually demonstrate by a demonstrable pronoun. And so, and twam is just a suffix meaning having a state of. So tattva means the condition of being a real thing that can actually be pointed out, that can actually be demonstrated. And so, therefore, it comes to mean in Sanskrit a categorical truth. In other words, like let's say the word jiva. Jiva means life. If we have Latin, it's viva. It's funny because we say viva, like long live, but in ancient Sanskrit they would say jiva. But so jiva tattva, in other words, individual souls are, that is a fundamental category of real thing. Therefore it's called jiva tattva, or God. Again, of course it's a category which only has one member, set only has one member, but still, it's a fundamental category, or ontological, metaphysical category, God, and then nature. So these are the three real things, real categories, which are God, nature, and souls. So everything in the universe can be explained as a combination, really just two categories, which are souls and nature. Souls and different kinds of bodies. So, just like, for example, let's say you see a light show and there's like 1,000 different colors of light. But all those lights can be explained by reference to two things. Number one, you have light, which is always the same actually, it's all the same color. And you have light passing through different coverings, which filter the light in different ways and display different aspects of the spectrum. So just as that's all light show is, no matter how many colors there are, it's just that one kind of light passing through different colored screens. So everything in the universe, all different forms of life it's just the soul, and souls are all the same kind, coming through different kinds of bodies, and therefore manifesting different states of consciousness. Like when we had a baby body, we manifested baby consciousness. We even done such infantile things as sucking our toes. So, which people crash and give up. So it was you. It's just like you take the same light and it comes through a red cover. It's called red light or yellow light or green light. So the same consciousness, when it comes to a baby body, it comes out as baby consciousness, or male consciousness, or female consciousness, or child, or adolescent, or orangutan consciousness, or E. coli consciousness, or whatever. But it's actually all the same, it's just the same soul. I don't mean the same actual soul, but we're all related, we're all the same kind of soul. We're all one as individual souls. So, so tattva vid, getting back to tattva vid, so to know tattva means that you understand the fundamental categories of reality. So an example of confusing tattva would be to think, for example, I am my physical body, which is confusing two categories, namely soul and physical nature. We're confusing those categories. Or if I think that when Krishna comes to this world, Krishna has a material body, that's confusing the category of God and nature. Or thinking that I am God, again, confusing the category. So when you just get these simple categories straight, there's God, there's souls, and there's nature, then you've got it. Basically, you understand the universe. And the rest is just the details. So, Krishna says that one who knows tattva realizes that the body is interacting with the material world, but I'm not actually doing anything. I'm witnessing all that. So, any question on these points? That's just one verse of the Gita.
Okay, so question, knowing that, that at the beginning of the class you mentioned that we're not actually the doer of anything, and then the conclusion was that the reason why we're not the doer of anything is because our true nature is the spirit soul, or is it because Krishna is in control?
Oh, well, when the body is acting or interacting with nature, that's where the body, we are, of course, responsible for the ways in which we move the body. For example, although you could say technically the body is speaking right now, I'm the soul inside, and yet I'm willing the body to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, I am responsible for my choices,
Mm-hmm.
for my use of free will. And so if I choose to align my will with Krishna's will, with God's will, then I become free from karma. I become free from karma. For example, let's say you work for the government in some capacity, and say you're in the military, and carry out an instruction. And let us say that the instruction was a reasonable one. Because even in the military, people are told that there's certain instructions you should not follow. Like if you're told to go massacre a bunch of children or something, you can't say I was just following orders. So there are boundaries. But let's say, for example, that you're working for the government, or let's say you're working for a company. Let's give a civil analogy. Let's say you're working for a company, and you're given an instruction like, do this, or whatever, and the instruction is not on the face of it, immoral or evil, and so you do it.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's some negative consequences, let's say you're told to make an investment, or to transfer funds, or to sell something at a certain price, or whatever, and it turns out that transaction harms the company in some way, but you were carrying out your duty, and given all the circumstances, it was not clear or obvious that you shouldn't do that, or that it was a bad instruction, anything like that, then you're not responsible. So ultimately, you could say the whole universe is one large spiritual corporation. It's a funny word to use. I throw that out there. But ultimately, considering there's a God, so if you act for God, then you're not acting for yourself. So for yourself, you're not really doing anything. And these actions don't involve, because someone could always say, well, what if in the name of God you do something really bad? And if you look at this tradition, Krishna consciousness, people don't really get instructions like that. No one really claims that Krishna wants you to do some crazy thing. Because it's obvious. So that, I mean, frankly, even within our spiritual tradition, if someone claiming to be an authority or a guru or whatever said that you should do something and you could see, well, that's not right, then it probably isn't. So even in our tradition, there are stories and teachings which make us aware that someone claiming to be representing God must act or speak within reasonable limits. Otherwise, we should not follow. So when we talk about following or serving God or following instructions, that there is obviously a hierarchy, because hierarchies are natural. Look at nature. Anyone thinks we don't want hierarchies, you really need to do some zoology. Because, someone that's anti-hierarchy is an unfortunate, alienated person that knows almost nothing about nature. That's just the way the world functions. I mean, it functions microbiologically, zoologically. That's just the way the world works. And so we are given those reasonable boundaries. So, for example, a guru in our literature, sacred literature, is all these statements about how one has to follow a guru and submit to a guru, and yet there are also instructions that you should not do anything weird. And that the guru cannot ask you to do something which, for one thing, I mean, you shouldn't follow an instruction which is obviously harmful to you or others. So again, within reasonable boundaries. There's a type of skepticism now. It's interesting. This is one I think I talked about last time. I don't want to go into that whole discussion, but this is not the most enlightened period in history, although people often think it is. Yeah, and whatever the legal status is of religions, or just even social, political groups, or ethnic groups, or religions, people tend to think that's reality. For example, if you look at Germany before World War II, or during World War II, before World War I, actually, Germany was in many ways the most advanced Western country in the world, the richest. It was most advanced scientifically, culturally, economically. It was the land of philosophers, of great composers of music. And so by the time people go through all these radical conditions, which radicalizes their own consciousness, and not only in Germany, actually, I mean, there was a significant Nazi movement in France, because the depression that wiped out Germany after World War I also affected France. That's a whole other discussion. People don't, because what happened is Germany invaded France, but actually there was a significant Nazi movement in France that welcomed the German invasion and saw it as a solution to France's problems. And even if you look at America during the Great Depression, there were all kinds of radical movements that gained a lot of ground in this country. It's just that Germany had the most radical situation, and they just kind of went totally off the rails. But so you have all these people, these educated people, who thought that because something is legal, like for example, turn in your Jewish neighbors, because it's legal, therefore somehow you should do it. It's the right thing to do. And we mentioned how in America they've done these tests where they brought people in and told them, I mean, it was all just told them that they were participating in a scientific experiment at some university, and they had to apply doses of electricity to a bunch of people on the other side of a one-way window. And of course, those people were just actors, but the people participating in the experiment, to the best of their knowledge, they were applying lethal doses of electricity. These people, other people who were actors, who would writhe in agony and show all the signs of, I'm being killed, and they would do it. They would actually, because they thought, well, this is a public university, and this is a professor, and this is a doctor and a scientist, and he's telling me to do this. So people do tend to equate legality with morality. That's a whole other topic, but it's something you find all over the world. It's not encouraging, but it's the case. The number of people in any society, if you look back at other societies that have slavery, even nowadays, I mean, there are all kinds of things going on in this country that people look back on a couple hundred years now and think, oh my God, how could they go along with that? So, it's just human psychology, unfortunately. If you look back at times there was slavery, at times there were all kinds of atrocities and inquisitions, there's all kinds of, history is pretty gory. And so if you really get into the details of history, you find that throughout history, all over the world, people did all kinds of really bad things because it was legal, or because someone, quote unquote, an authority told them to do it. So one aspect today is, because we live in an age of, you could say, it might be fair to say, at least in the West, unprecedented religious freedom. If you look back at ancient India, they did have sort of unrestricted religious freedom, very similar to what we have today. There really was, but still, in terms of modern history or Western history, we have unprecedented religious freedom. And therefore, what's happened is, for most people, without studying world religions, without knowing practically anything about philosophy or theology, they assume it to be the case that competing spiritual claims are all relative. Because they're equal, because they're legally equal, they must be philosophically equal. Or they must be metaphysically equal. And therefore, we have ways of talking nowadays which, if you think about it, obviously are absurd, and yet no one notices that they're saying something absurd. For example, people will say like, oh, is that your truth? So what does it actually mean? For example, let's say I'm taking a math class and I mark, I think 2 and 2 are 5 for some reason. I tell the teacher, hey, that's my truth. Or what if I'm a boat builder and my boat sinks or my bridge collapses, and I say, well, that's my truth. That's my bridge truth. So, but that's, again, this way of talking, that is that your truth, or that's my truth, or everyone has their own truth. Hardly anyone stops to think, well, wait a second. If there really is an objective world, and if anyone can really know anything about reality objectively, which seems to be the case, then how could someone have a personal, private truth? So what does it mean to have a truth? What it really means is that to have a truth is no longer, when someone says, this is my truth, it's not like it used to be, where you're talking about what you believe to be the reality of the world. You're actually reporting to us about your own personal psychology. You're saying that, well, it makes me feel good to believe that. And whether what I believe actually corresponds to a real world, irrelevant. It's like people take a pill or a drug. Yeah, it makes me feel good. Well, what's in it? I don't know. I'm not a chemist. So it's really, literally, we are living in the Brave New World. Because if you look at that book by Huxley, Brave New World, people took soma, which is funny, it's based on the Sanskrit word soma, which was this sort of nectar that the gods would offer the gods. But people take Soma in Brave New World, and they just live in these little compartments, and they're very happy, they're drugged out. And as far as what's real and unreal, not important. So there's the level of narcissism, of vanity. It's interesting because Freud showed, 100 years ago approximately, Freud showed the role of the superego in the sense that what everyone around you tells you is true, or tells you you are, or what you should do, your parents, society, government. If everyone around you is telling you something, then you come to believe that's true. That's the role of superego. So nowadays, the superego really is marketing. Because we are literally drowning in an ocean of advertising, all of it appealing to our vanity. Like if you smoke this cigarette, you're not stupidly, killing yourself. What you're really doing is sublimating your life and walking in the clouds with a very beautiful girl, and that's what you're really doing. You're not stupidly killing yourself. So everything is advertising, right? And it's sort of like the universal mode, the universal way of selling anything to anybody is by flattering them. Like, you're powerful, you're great, you're incredible, therefore buy this chewing gum. And so therefore, people, again, thinking, not the national pastime, so people nowadays live in a world in which everything around them is feeding into their mindless vanity, into their self-centeredness, even as, ironically, people have less and less and less control over their lives. So it's funny, in the real world, because everything, for example, the NSA, people always talk about a global village, which obviously is not the case, but guess what? People forgot one thing. With all this enthusiasm about a global village, they forgot one thing. In villages, there's no privacy. Everyone knows everybody else's business. That's the nature of it. You ever lived in a village? Everyone knows your business. And so there's less and less privacy, less and less real freedom. If you don't have tens of millions of dollars, you're not a viable candidate for anything. And so as our freedom, as our privacy shrinks, our sort of mindless sense of being the center of the universe is growing. And so we're getting farther and farther away from reality. But because we're surrounded by all this vanity-inducing advertising, everyone advertises now. When I was a kid, when I was young, like doctors and lawyers didn't advertise. It was considered inappropriate, it was undignified. Now, colleges advertise. They like sort of unashamedly, they just advertise, because they want to bring money in. So everyone advertises, everyone appeals to your vanity, and so we live in this narcissistic age, which everyone has their own truth, and everyone's beautiful, and everyone's perfect, and it's a madness. So in this age, trying to sort of shake people and say, hey, wake up. There's actually a purpose of life. There's actually a real truth out there, and it's a challenge. So, anyway, any other question? Yes.
Can you speak some about ahankara? Like, for instance, in the yoga tradition, they talk about freeing oneself from the false ego. So in our Vaishnava understanding, how does one deal with the ahankara?
Well, ahankara is interesting. That's sort of the common Sanskrit word for ego or false ego. It literally means I am doing. Aham is the Sanskrit pronoun I. Interestingly, Sanskrit H tends to become a in European languages tends to become a G. So from aham, you get the Greek word ego. Just the H changes to G, like in Sanskrit word vahana means a vehicle, so that becomes German Wagen. Or the word Maha, like Mahabharata, Maha means great, and it becomes Latin magna. Magna Carta, great. There's many examples that. So aham means I, it just means ego, I. Ego is just the first person singular pronoun. And then kara, again, same root as karma, like create, English create, karma, kara. So kara just means doing. So it's identifying with the body and thinking that I am the one that's doing this. Now, of course, to say I'm not the body is a negative concept in the sense it tells us what we are not. It's like the Buddhist term nirvana, which also is in the Gita, but it's a negative term in Sanskrit because nir means without. So, for example, one way of saying no ego is niraham, without aham, without ego. And so similarly, nirvana means without vana, without the current of material life. So, ahankara, yeah, it's thinking that I'm doing everything, ignoring the fact that I'm the soul in the body, and that there's a God, there's a powerful nature around me. It's funny, let's say someone buys a house in the mountains, a beautiful mountain, scene behind them, and then their friends come over to visit their new house. Oh my God, it's so beautiful, congratulations, as if they built the mountains, you know, it's... They kind of get credit for the... It's interesting because there's a competition, I guess commercial competition between Las Vegas and Reno. And so I remember I was driving, years ago I was driving into Reno, toward Reno, and they, on the highway had this big, huge billboard. And on the billboard they had this like breathtaking picture of the High Sierras, snow-covered peaks of the High Sierras. Then beneath it, it said, "Build this Las Vegas." Because they built other ones. Yes.
It's another topic. It's kind of similar to what we were discussing about. I haven't done any research, but I know some devotees who ask a question: how do I know what I'm doing is based on my mind or is paramatma? Basically.
Based on,
Like,
how do I know it's based on?
I don't like experience. Basically, one receives a devotee practicing, and he might believe it's paramatma reaching to him.
That's God speaking to you.
Yeah. So how do you know if it's not really speculation or is actually Krishna really speaking to his heart?
Good question. Well, that we can consider that at different levels. Like you can say, how do I know there's a God at all? How do I know that anything is true? Or, and let's say if you have a basic conviction, understanding that yes, Krishna is real, I'm real. So how do I know that, for example, Krishna really wants me to fly to Milwaukee next week and do something? So do you mean all those things, or?
Yeah, because Krishna's always manifesting so many services, and how do you know which ones, for example, as a practical, or maybe just a practical example as...
Well, yeah, I mean, Krishna, good news is that God has common sense. Contrary to what some people have believe. So, if you think about it, I mean, think of, well, I don't want to say you were God. Anyone see that movie, Bruce Almighty?
Yeah.
So, like for Prabhupada, we take Prabhupada to be a pure representative of Krishna. And when we are developing, let's say, an international society, an international movement to try to spiritualize the world, then things have to be done in a practical way. For example, Prabhupada would encourage his disciples to follow their local authorities, because otherwise things just become chaotic and you can't get anything done. It's chaos, anarchy. However, if, let's say, a disciple was discouraged or really unhappy about something, then Prabhupada would say, okay, then make some other arrangement. Or if someone in a leadership position gave inappropriate instruction. So it's pretty much, to some extent, even though it's a spiritual movement, you have to use a lot of common sense and just do things appropriately. There has to be organization, there has to be hierarchy, and there have to be boundaries, and you have to make exceptions, and so on. Because otherwise, imagine a movement where everyone just sort of has the gift of prophecy and the gift of, so at any moment anyone can just stand up and say, oh my God, Krishna just told me to, you should give me your car. Actually, that became a problem.
He just got a new car.
Oh, that's all it's interesting because if you look at the very, very early Jesus movement, and probably the best source is it's of course the only source in the New Testament, especially like the book of Acts, the apostles, and the letters of Paul. It's obvious they have this problem. There are certain things, let's say, which are unique to a movement because it's the Krishna movement or the Jesus movement. But other things, it's just human beings. It's just, sociology 1A, and that's just what humans are. And you find it in every movement, no matter what the religion is. And so, in the Jesus movement, and this is very early on, based on what it said in the New Testament, they had a problem because some people were claiming a special gift, like they would speak in tongues, or they would stand up ecstatically in the middle of a meeting and just kind of go crazy and start telling everybody, no, actually, God just told me that you're fired, you're not in charge of this community anymore. And then they would write a letter to Paul and say, Paul, here we are in Ephesus, and so and so is just causing a lot of trouble. And so the New Testament is full of that stuff, especially in letters of Paul. Just just practical management. And if you look at how Paul responds in his letters, we don't have the original letters, we just have his answers. It's the same thing, it's just common sense, and just let's be reasonable. We have to have some organization, and if everyone claims that, God just told them to do some crazy thing, it's not going to work. So it's not to rule out, some people may be inspired, and as I say, everyone can have their Rudolph moment. Then one foggy Christmas Eve. So anyone can, it's possible that God can choose you to do some special, wonderful service, and that you become inspired, and you're given a real gift, like you're able to do something. I think it should be real eccentric, like Krishna just told me that he's going to destroy the world by flood, and I need to build an ark. Probably you wouldn't get a lot of support for that. Especially because the movie wasn't that good. So, but there have to be reasonable. There have to be reasonable rules of the road. And then if someone, let's say, feels strongly that no, Krishna really wants me to do this, even though other people don't see it, well, you can always remain cooperative and sane, but just try to develop a program and see if empowerment is coming along with that revelation. Because if it's a revelation with no empowerment, probably it's your mind playing tricks on you. It's like your mother tells you to go to the store and buy a carton of milk. She gives you enough money to go to the store and buy a carton of milk. So God is really telling you to do something, then you should get the ability to carry it out.
It kind of reminded me of what you just said on chapter 2. Arjuna asked Krishna 4 specific questions about how what is a person's consciousness like when he's transcendental, and it's based on also externals and internal. So that helped a lot. Thank you.
Huh. I speak long enough, everybody will get hungry. Anything else?
I have a thought. When you were speaking earlier, this is like a very brief minute, when you distinguish between, female and male energies, I kind of can't help but think this because I'm in a sociology gender class at the moment, but I was wondering if in a metaphysical aspect or a more spiritual one, besides biological means for differences of being male and female, is there a reason I turned out to be female energy-wise in this life versus me being a male in a different life? Like, I guess for less purposes other than biological reproduction.
Yeah, definitely.
So I guess
Yeah,
with that being said,
sure.
what? Yeah.
Well, first of all of us have been men and women in many lives.
Mhm.
We've been around the block. Right? So, it's just like, where are you when the music stops? So,
One's funny.
yeah, so in this particular life, you just happen to be doing the female thing. Or in your past life, it could be, for example, a guy could be just obsessed with a woman, or maybe not, just really attached to a woman. And so when he dies, he becomes a woman, or vice versa, a woman is attached to a man. And so, it's because we've all been so many things. The whole purpose of creating this sort of metaphysical Disney world called the universe is it's to give the soul a chance to take their best shot at being happy without God. Krishna is not an angry God. He's not jealous. He doesn't. Actually, the good news is that God does not need a single 12-step program. Not for anger management, not for jealousy, not for anything. And so, if you don't want to love and serve God, if you want to pretend that you're the center of everything, then Krishna says, "Be my guest. I'll give you a universe in which you can try it." And then, when we come to this universe, your fate, your karma, what happens to you, really just depends on your own behavior. So the laws of karma, it's not that you don't get penalized for not believing in Krishna, and that's clear in the Gita. There's no penalty for not believing in Krishna. It's just that the karma you get is all based on the moral quality of your behavior, the extent to which you do good. In other words, things that benefit others and yourself, objectively. To that extent, you get good results. The extent to which you harm yourself and others, to that extent, the harm comes back to you to teach you not to harm. So system karma is totally dogma-free. That's kind of a poison to the Jesus movement, to be honest. Because if you look at the teachings of Jesus, they're quite beautiful. I mean, there's no problem there. He's a really great teacher. But then at a certain point, they poisoned it. The poison pill was putting aside what Jesus actually said. And we know he said it because it's there in the New Testament. What Jesus actually taught, and what his predecessor, John the Baptist, taught. Namely that if you love your neighbor as yourself, it's a beautiful thought, love your neighbor as yourself, and love God above all things, then you're good to go. Or another statement, Jesus said that as you treat the lowest of my people, you treat me. So if you're just good to people, if you're just a good, the Good Samaritan, Jesus pointed out the Good Samaritan. And so that basically was the message of Jesus. Love God with all your heart, soul, and might. Love your neighbor as yourself. Be good to people, and God will elevate you. That was the basic message. And therefore, in the actual teachings of Jesus, progress or elevation or liberation or salvation are all based rationally on doing good, on love, loving God, loving other souls. So it's completely however, at a certain point in history, and this becomes completely, how should I put, formalized in the teachings of Paul, they shifted that so that the qualification for salvation is no longer rational and obviously true. Be a good person, love God, help other people. But suddenly it becomes you have to believe a certain doctrine. It's actually an ideological requirement that you are saved by believing someone's interpretation of Jesus. Namely, he died for your sins, and et cetera, et cetera. And so whoever believes that is saved. You're saved not by being a good person, but by believing a particular dogma.
Mm.
And that led to a horrible consequence, which is that people were tortured and killed in the most horrible ways simply because they didn't agree to something. I mean, people who were nice people, they were good people, men and women, living good lives, loving God, respecting their neighbors, doing exactly what Jesus said to do, but they were brutalized and tortured and mutilated and murdered. Why? Because they didn't believe a certain doctrine, thought control. So if you think about it, that shift from the real program of Jesus, which was common sense, beautiful, obviously true, and you go from that to this nightmare evil, where God, first of all, you get a God who is the most psychotic, evil figure ever conceived by a human mind, namely someone who is determined to torture his own children forever for doctrinal mistakes. And if you think about that, it's worse than wrong, it's evil. And that's why it produced so much evil, because, Jesus, what did Jesus say? A tree is known by its fruits? Well, look at the fruits of the history of that movement.
Mm.
I mean, no other single human institution produced that much evil in the world. I'm not against any religion. I'm not saying it's a false religion. There are a lot of very good people in all these different religions. I'm just saying, though, that objectively no other single human institution caused that much evil in the world in terms of, your basic evil, torture, mutilation, murder, etc. And so how could an institution cause that huge amount of evil unless there was something evil in the foundation? And it's very easy. It's a no-brainer. It's obvious. You can find the evil very easily. And so in the Bhagavad Gita, if you look at Bhagavad Gita, interestingly, Krishna says that you can be elevated in your next life, you can become wise and happy in this world without Krishna. Because those are all the results of goodness, living a virtuous life. Krishna says that Urdhvam gachanti sattvasta, those who abide in virtue ascend, go upward. And he says that sattvat samjayate sukham, that from virtue, from goodness comes happiness, and that sattam prakashakam, that goodness is enlightening, it brings wisdom. And yet Krishna also says that those in goodness, yajante sattvika devan, in chapter 17, that those in goodness worship the various gods. So in other words, you can be a good, happy, wise, upwardly mobile soul without Krishna, according to Krishna. Which I think is very, refreshing, because it shows he's not psychotic. But of course, if you want Krishna, what Krishna is saying is, if you want me, you have to come to me. It's like let's say, a guy says to his girlfriend, "I love you," or to his wife, "I love you, but I'm going out with Shirley." "Yeah, but I want you to know that I really love you." And his wife says, "Well, if you want me, you have to be with me." And he says, "Come on, you're fanatical." And I remember when I was taking a course at UCLA years ago, I was talking to a friend of mine who was a physics professor, and he said that he went to Rio de Janeiro. He said he'd never seen such a lusty city. And he said that, what was it, that they said he met these guys had this line where a guy would approach a girl and she would say, "I'm sorry, I'm married." And the guy would say, "That's okay. I'm not the jealous type." So, but anyway, Krishna is, you just get what you deserve. You just get what you deserve according to the laws of karma. I forget what our topic was, but where do we start?
Talking about male and female.
Oh, yeah.
Perspective.
Yeah, so we've all been around the gender bush many times, and so it's just when the music stopped in this life, this is where you were. And it's interesting because, I mean, as all reliable science shows, that in some ways men and women are the same, in some ways are different, many exceptions. So it's like, but ultimately it doesn't matter, because whoever you are, whatever your nature is, you just have to engage in Krishna service. And that's the important thing. Because, and we can't, I mean, dogmatism, fanaticism doesn't work. So saying, okay, you're a man or you're a woman, therefore you have to be like this. It's crazy. Everyone just is whoever they are. And so the real point is, whoever you are, just take stock, take inventory of what your psychophysical nature is in this life, and then spiritualize it, engage it for Krishna. Going. Me too, actually. Oh, are you hungry again?
Are you hungry?
No.
I made you that after rice with peas.
Ah, você fez? Ah, talvez eu vou levar comigo.
Mas vou pôr na geladeira, que horas você vai sair?
Não, eu vou sair agora.
Ah,
Português.
não ficou?
Como ficou?
Ah, não ficou crunch.
Ah,
Mas eu acho que se eu colocar no oven,
sim, eu vou fazer
liga um
isso.
pouquinho, deixa bem fraquinho e deixa lá.
Não, eu entendo, eu faço isso.
Aí vai ficar crunch de novo.
Tá bom.
E ficou crunch, não acabou de fazer.
Combinado. So, thank you all very much for coming. Mandazo. Ah?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So, shame we can't have kirtans here.
Why not?
Let's see.
It's daytime.
Because that was the idea of Krishna West, going to have all this music stuff going on. Let's see.
Aw, there's not a guitar here.
Oh, you play
There is a guitar here.
There is.
Who plays the guitar?
Oh,
small one.
so does yes.
Yeah, there is a guitar.
So, how do you, there's supposed to be a tones thing on this? Oh, here it is. Oh, that's it, you press tones and then 48.
I hate to say this, but
Oh,
I don't even know. I didn't even do anything. I literally saved and exited the game by the exit back. I tried, okay?
Look at me. I told you not to install those games. I
You know
told
these
you before you
things-
did the first time. I told you again.
trying to get a
when
certain
you did
tone.
the second
Mama, do you know how this works? Because I press
You
tone.
said
The thing is, I think it might be actually the program that they used to actually run the game because that was actually the actual games themselves.
I mean, yeah, I think
the
you just,
thing that they had downloaded
You press the
like
number of
because
what, which
I
is
told
the
you
sign.
period.
I did that, and I pressed, because these are tones here,
Then
so I
listen
hit,
to
I
me
pressed tone,
twice.
I think, remember?
So, which one do you want?
48.
I'm never waking up.
Is that the one that's